think I'm going to be doing something at the board, and I decided to go to law school. Well, shortly after I decided to go to law school, went through 1 year of it, was just really enjoying it, then the fire chief's position came open in Covington. I hadn't planned on doing this, was encouraged to do it, had become political a little bit during this time, and consider the law. And I just wanted to be a labor attorney when I graduated, or when I got out of law school. It's exactly what I did. I'm a solo labor attorney. I'm currently doing that, and I do it for almost exclusively for public service unions. Mostly firefighters, the transit workers, and some teachers that I've worked with, and that's what I'm currently doing. And these things all tie very well, I think, into becoming a state legislator. I'm general counsel for the Kentucky Professional Firefighters. That's a statewide organization. I spend a lot of time in Frankfort. I spend a lot of time analyzing legislation. Over the last 10 years, I've really gotten to know how the system works, who you have to know, how a bill goes through the system, the ways that it can be sidetracked, as some of we all learned very recently, and the ways bills can be stripped and whole new things can come in. And that's a part of the process. The process is important, and it's important to be transparent. It's important too that there's a fair chance to vet every piece of legislation and all the aspects of the legislation. And as I'm sure some of you are aware, that certainly hasn't happened recently. So, you know, being general counsel for the Kentucky Professional Firefighters has me very familiar with the pension issue. And these gets into the issues that are important to me and will be important to me as a state legislator. I was around and did quite a bit of work when the CERS, those are the county and local government employees, went into this hybrid system. This was 4 years ago, before the current pension issue started evolving into a hybrid system for the teachers. We recognized that it wasn't going to be a good thing. It was they call it a hybrid because it's partly defined benefit and partly an individual retirement account like that. It's not a good tool for public servants, and you know we get into this, and the public servants are getting into it now. Teachers and cops and firefighters, state workers, they don't get into the business to become rich. They know they're going to do the public service and do the things that are just sort of a calling for them, and they should be recognized. They should have some pension security, some pension stability when they retire, and that's something that I'm a strong, very firm believer in that kind of thing. And I will be, when I get elected, I will be a strong proponent of that when I get down there, of changing it back. And some of you may have known other states have gone to some kind of hybrid system or IRA type of accounts for the public employees and gone back. And that's what we're going to do in Kentucky. Other issues now, when I first got into the race, the issues that were important to me were education, of course, pension system, the opioid crisis, infrastructure and roads, and for me in the 65th district, that includes the bridge and tolling, which is a big issue. But now, what's happened even within the last week, tax reform. So now tax reform with the passage of the budget, and again, we're in the midst of all this, so it's not happening quite yet. But the budget includes a tax reform package that is completely the wrong way to go in taxes, and that's something I'm going to fight for when I get to Frankfort, is to have a fair tax system. This issue has been studied many times, and there's been many proposals out there that are more fair. They're not such regressive taxes, and I won't go into all the details. I could, but we won't have time for that tonight. But I'll certainly be for a tax system that is more fair and does not put such a burden on working classes and lower and impoverished or our marginalized populations. Again, that gets into some other big budget areas of our current budget, what the state is in charge of. That has to do with our healthcare system. As you all know, you probably are aware of the Medicaid waiver that Governor Bevin has pushed, and we're nearly on the verge of that happening. I'll go way back, you know, and I told you early that I probably thought, I may not be able to be a candidate because I'm pretty liberal. One thing I've been, even before it was called this, was single payer, a supporter of a single payer system. I really do feel like it is a right, and there are some other very practical things, and this is another thing about my particular personality. I'm very fiscally conservative. Single payer is going to save us a lot of money. Not only is it a right, and it's the best way we can go about delivering a good healthcare system to the whole population. It also is probably going to be significant cost savings. So we won't go into those details, but that's the way I really believe, and I've believed it for a long time. There are, you know, we have a national healthcare law, and I do support it. But there are some states who have looked at single payer as an option, and there's something called the SPAN, the Single Payer Action Network, which is something I'm learning more about it. And they've introduced legislation, they have legislation for states. The state of Ohio actually has a single payer legislation has been introduced. Something to study, but I know generally I would support it. I see the time's getting short, and I don't want to go into every issue, but there are many. I'm very familiar with them. I look forward to talking to you about them and talking further. I look forward to all your help and anything that you can do. You know, I will be successful. I know I'm going to be successful, but we need to help Larry. We need to help Josh. We need to help Roberto. And Jesse, of course, just walked in the room. You know, we need to bring it back to the people. Bring back the ability to legislate, the ability to our working families, our working classes to have a voice. And I really will do that. And I look forward to helping everybody else. I look forward to your questions and anything else we need to talk about tonight. We meet people tonight. That's it.
Thank you. Josh, are you next?
Sure.
My name is Josh Blair. I am running in the 63rd House District, which is the other part of Park Hills that's not in Buddy's district. Park Hills, Fort Wright, down to Edgewood and parts of Erlanger, which is actually where I live, Villa Hills, Crescent Springs area. I'm going to be the first challenger on the November ballot for the seat in 18 years. There was a special election. There was a special election in 2008, but in terms of the actual general election, it's been 18 years since this seat has been challenged. So, you know, there's a lot of enthusiasm behind that. People say, well, I finally have a choice. We know that, you know, up here, you know, we don't really vote for things like county commissioner and things like that because they're never opposed. It's just always, you know, the one name on the ballot. And the state rep's been like that for, again, 18 years, so we finally are giving people a choice. You know, I think most people know that there are a record number of educators running in the state of Kentucky this year, and I'm part of that. I'm an adjunct professor at NKU with Kristen. And I've been there for about 4.5 years. I'm also a graduate at NKU. And I also am a big supporter of public education. I went to Beechwood High School. My son goes to Turkey Foot. My twin daughters go to Cadewood. My mom went to Dixie. My dad went to Lloyd. My grandma and grandpa went to Holmes. My brother and my aunt went to Dixie. So, you know, we're all, you know, products of public schools, and we, you know, my next door neighbor is a public school teacher. You know, my campaign manager is a public school teacher. So, we've seen what's been going on, you know, in Frankfurt this past week, and this sort of attack on public education, this sort of disregard for that. But obviously, for me, working in higher ed, it's also an issue in higher ed as well, because NKU is getting a 6.25% budget cut this year after a budget cut, and a budget cut, and a budget cut, and a budget cut. And we're at the point now where we can't save any more paper. That's kind of the first thing. Well, let's not make as many copies, and let's order bulk, stuff like that, right? And it's like, okay, well that's not going to save us millions of dollars. The thing I tell people, when I started NKU in the fall of 2001, full-time semester was $1,200. I got Keys money. Keys money sort of started like in the middle of my high school career, so I didn't get as much as some other people I know. So my first semester at NKU was $800. 2001 is a little bit farther away than I would like it to be, but it's not that long ago. Right? If you think of it, so a semester was $1,200. Now a semester is over $4,600. So it's more than triple, and it's going to go up. We're going to raise tuition again for this upcoming school year. And if you think about anything in the past 17 years, it's tripled in price. Homes, gas, milk, bread, any of those things, nothing has, right? People would lose their minds. But college tuition has, and it's been vastly underfunded in Kentucky. I think it was in 2015 where the amount that the state contributed versus the amount that tuition covered crisscrossed. So, so the students are bearing a much larger brunt of that than what the state is putting in. And we're one of, I think, 3 states that are still not funding higher education at levels prior to what we were in 2008 after the economic crash. So we're definitely in the minority there. And and I find that interesting because we have a governor who's all about workforce development, right? I'm all about workforce development. That's great. But the things that are happening in Frankfurt are very counter to that because when you cut higher education budgets, it does 3 things. It raises tuition, and that's the very first thing it does. It also cuts services. So at NKU, there's an early childhood center that's been there for 30 years. It's closing in July. NK, yeah,
What's closing?
It's early childhood center.
Okay.
Basically, it's a daycare for
Sure.
faculty, staff, and why that's so significant at NKU is because NKU was founded for non-traditional students. So a lot of people who have children. There are a lot of students at NKU who rely on that center to go to school so they can take their child there and take classes and get their child. It also is a great resource for students who are in the early childhood education to get their kind of practicum intern credit. And they employ people, right? So that budget cut is getting rid of that services. We saw the Center for Mathematics, we almost lost that. The governor, I guess the House kind of included that back in the budget. But there are crucial services at NKU and the other state universities in Kentucky that are losing things that we really need in our state and really value. And then the third thing is a reduction in staff, which goes counter to workforce development because it's the opposite of that. Right? And I know personally, I've talked to administrators at NKU, and they said, this next round of budget cuts means a reduction in staff. There's no more savings. We've cut and saved whatever. We're going to have to let people go. We see this legislation now where they might make it legal to fire tenured faculty if there's budget cuts. And the idea behind that, I'm an adjunct, so basically they would cut tenured faculty and they would fill that with adjuncts and they get paid less and they get zero benefits. So you're not getting that tenured faculty in there who've been there for 5, 10, 15 or more years. And kind of tying to what Buddy was saying, just kind of the working class or wherever, it's getting harder and harder for people to afford college. I have a 7th grader and a 3rd grader, and we're not really thinking about college yet, but I don't think it's going to get cheaper in 5 years and 8 years. So I'm concerned about that. That it keeps going up and up and up, and it's getting unaffordable for just everyday people to go to college, and especially those people that are kind of on that they're not really in poverty, and they maybe their parents make too much, so they don't get any grants or scholarships or things like that. And I had just this semester a student who was, I guess she didn't really drop out, but was sort of kicked out for financial reasons. Very smart, very talented. It's a shame, right? She wants to go to school and she wants to get a degree, get a job, and build a life for herself, but because of money she can't. And that's not what public education is about, right? It's about the access to people to go to that. So so these budget cuts to K-12 to preschool to higher ed, it's all kind of intertwined. And just kind of briefly some other issues, and I know Buddy touched on some of this, but things like the economy, things like the heroin epidemic. We all know that if you're well educated, you're less likely to do drugs, you're less likely to turn to crime. So if we invest in education, starting at in preschool, early childhood education, obviously K through 12 and higher ed, then we're going to have less crime. There's going to be less drug use. People are going to have good jobs. It's going to stimulate the economy. But we're doing the opposite. We are underfunding and defunding education. And so what's going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years? We're going to just dig a new hole, right? Maybe we do solve this heroin crisis, but if we don't solve all these issues that are causing that, then we're back back where we are. So I grew up here. I grew up in Fort Mitchell, Lakeside Park area. I love Northern Kentucky, I really do. I moved away for 4 years. I went to graduate school at Ohio University, and then I worked at Syracuse University for 3 years. And I made a very conscious and very expensive decision to move back to Northern Kentucky to raise my family. I had a good job at Syracuse University, really great benefits. The weather was horrible, but other than that, everything was pretty good. I quit my job and I moved back here, no job lined up, nowhere to live, with twin 9-month-old babies and a 2.5-year-old, because I knew that this is where I wanted to raise my family. And luckily I found a place to live, I found a job, but that's how much I care about this community, and that's part of why I'm running this too, because I know all of you feel very strongly about this area. If you were born and raised here like me and Buddy, or if you've moved here like some other folks in the room, and I know it's especially frustrating when you get people who are not from the state, come here and then they start changing things, right? And so I always will put the best interest of our community and our community members in any decision I make, because that's what a state rep is supposed to do. We're supposed to represent the people, and we've seen a lot of frustration that people are saying nobody's listening to the teachers, nobody's listening to the police, nobody's listening to the firefighters, and we have people saying that they are listening, but I think they're maybe they're hearing them, they're not listening. They're certainly not. When you have 10,000 teachers and state employees down in Frankfurt saying one thing and you do the opposite, then you're obviously not listening to them. There's some sort of disconnect, and we have to do what's best for our communities, what's best for our people, what's best for our students, and what's best for Northern Kentucky. So that's what I try to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Larry, would you like to come up and talk to us? Larry Varney, everybody.
Clapping now. Okay, I'm Larry Varney, as she said. If any of you are on Facebook, you may have already somewhat met me. I'm not going to reiterate my stance on the various issues because they're pretty much like the two predecessors have already said. The pension problems, education in general, and so on. But that gets back to where I came from. And I'm originally from Ohio. Don't hold that against me. Honestly, I moved down here. I married my wife, Karen Ware, it's been over 30 years ago. Jeez. You don't feel old until you hear somebody like Josh talking about when he was in college in 91 or 2001? Yeah. I graduated from college in 1969. But anyway, I've been a resident of Kentucky for over 30 years now. The Wares, her family live over in Campbell County, that's where I live now too. And they've been there for literally over a century. They got a plaque up on their barn and all kinds of things. So if you go down Licking Pike and you see a big white barn up there, 2 miles from the AA, that's them. I live just across the road. But anyway, I started out interested in education. That's part of the things that got me interested in doing all this. I graduated from college in Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond in 1969, as I mentioned, as an English teacher. I taught English in Florida for a couple of years. One of the things that happened way before that, back in elementary school, I'm not sure which teacher used to harp on it, but she liked to say, learn more, do more, be more. And, I thought, oh, okay, so I'm going to use that as an excuse for some of the things I've done, because throughout junior high, high school, all that, I really liked English. So I was an English teacher. I taught literature, grammar, all those things. So it always bugs me when somebody uses the wrong word or the wrong tense or something as a curse of an ex-English teacher. But long about, a couple of years into teaching English, that learn more, do more, and all that, a program opened up in the state of Ohio to take people who were in too crowded of fields, such as English, and re-educate them to be shop teachers. Anybody knows me as I'm the most non-mechanically inclined person around. Anything beyond duct tape and a Phillips screwdriver and I'm lost. But I thought this is my chance to learn more about, how to do things like wood shop and things. I mean, I'm not that handy around tools. Back then I was even worse. So I went back to school, my University of Knoxville, Ohio, and became a shop teacher. And so I taught an industrial arts course over in Harrison, Ohio for a couple of years. It was kind of fun, because I was learning as much as the kids were learning. I learned several things, that I really don't like welding, especially, electric arc welding. You can't see anything, then it would spark, and I thought, oh God, I don't do that. I was pretty good with other things, cutting things with saws and all that, so I learned something. So, like I said, I did that for a couple of years, enjoying it, but then that learn more, do more, etc. About then is when personal computers first came out. I mean, literally, Commodore 64s, VIC-20s, Trash 80s from Radio Shack, all these historic things. And I had an early Apple II. It was, 64K. It was like, actually, it came with 48K, but then I got a card that added in a 16 and all that. And not only were they fun to play with, in a sense, but then I started getting interested in programming these things. And I thought, this is really neat. And to get it to do anything, nowadays you can do more on your phone, but back then it was like a miracle. I still got a 300 baud modem at home. I've got lots of stuff at home that I probably, that's one thing nice about having a basement. You don't have to throw it away. So I got interested in learning more about computers, went back to school, got a degree in computer programming, and I was a programmer for a couple of years. And then this other company based over in Cincinnati, I don't know if you ever heard of Syncom, but they like to build themselves as the largest privately owned software company in the world or something like that. I don't know if they still do that or not. But anyway, they were interested in hiring me because not only because I programmed, but because of the education background. So I wound up for about the next, 25 years at least, going out teaching companies how to use their software. Everybody from higher-ups to secretaries and everybody in between, how to program with their software, how to just basically use it. And I traveled literally all over the country, 2 and 3 weeks out of every month. I would sometimes wake up and not know what town I was in. Got lots of frequent flyer points, though. Boy. But I went to, I think, every state except Hawaii. I never got to go to Hawaii. I did go to Monaco, which was nice. And I also spent a couple of weeks in the Philippines. I still remember walking into a McDonald's there, and I was the tallest one in the room. And I was also, speaking of McDonald's, in the first McDonald's in Monaco. And they had, everything was in French over there. And I had taken French in college. I hate to explain why, because I thought, I don't know, I had had Latin and German in high school. What do I want to take in college? I didn't really care. And I thought, how do I decide? I thought, I'll look for the cheapest first year book. So French came out 50 cents a head. So I took 2 years of French, went over there, and thought, I can, And so I'll have a Quatre Libre avec fromage. And the girl behind the counter said, you want fries with that. So I guess maybe the accent or whatever, and the camera around my neck, I'm always taking pictures. Anybody's out on Facebook, they'll see that I take a lot of pictures. But anyway, I didn't go to that. I didn't go to the casino, but I did go to the McDonald's. Anyway, I did that for about 30 years. Enjoyed it. It was fun. And after that, I retired. That's even more fun. But all this education stuff, I've always been interested in education from back when I was in junior high and teaching, and so there were rumors about what they were going to do with pensions for the state employees and the teachers and so on. So even, like last year, I was thinking, I wish I was, could do something about this. And lo and behold, when it came up this year, finding out that there was nobody running as an opponent to the current person that's in this office for the 64th district, I thought, I got to do that. My chances of getting elected aren't that great because there are more Republicans in this 64th district than there are Democrats, but, miracles can happen, and I'm going to try and help it. That's probably the main things about my life, but I do want to say one more thing. My nickname is Santa. I don't know why. But I do want to mention one thing, though. Honestly, I don't know how many of you are all familiar with the K&M feed over in Alexandria, but on Thanksgiving weekend, you can bring your pets, dogs, cats, whatever, farm animals, cows, chickens, parrots, everything over there and have their picture taken with Santa. So I've walked outside and held onto horses. I've had ducks, I've had goats, everything on my lap. So, I hope you all come over there and, get your picture taken, or your pet's picture taken with Santa. So anyway, I'm looking forward to learning more about you all and winning the election. I think it'll be great. So, one other thing. If you're interested in recumbent bicycles, I'm into that. I'm the co-editor of the world's largest online magazine devoted to recumbent bicycles. So I got lots of pictures of those here, and I have quite a few in my garage. Anyway, I'm glad to be here, and I hope to see more of you a lot.
What are you running for?
The 64th District State Representative. So hopefully. And it's just a little sliver of Campbell County's in the 64th. Most of it's over here. Over in Kenton County. So I got a collector's card here too, so. I started to check how to vote, and I thought, wait, I'm in the wrong county. And if y'all have any questions or anything, I'll be available.
Thanks, Larry. And our final candidate of the night should be no stranger to anybody here. Roberto is an integral part of Indivisible Northern Kentucky District 4, as well as a candidate. So, of course, we're going to give him a little extra pump here at the end. Without him, we won't be here. I'm going to tell you all that right now, because he is our IT guy. And without him, we'd be lost. Andrew and I'd be just floating on Facebook as a pair. We wouldn't have all this. We would not have all this. We're really excited to kind of push him as both a progressive candidate, an indivisible candidate, and we're really excited that he's here.
Thanks for that, Ann. I appreciate that. Let me start off by thanking everybody for coming out. This is great, having all y'all come out for these meetings. Really means a lot. For a lot of us running, it's hard for us to get to speak to different people, like Buddy was talking about. So the more people we get to these and getting a chance to broadcast is a real help to get our word out. So my name is Roberto Enriquez. Like Ann said, I am on the leadership team for Indivisible Northern Kentucky. I'm running for State House of Representatives, District 66, which is in Boone County. It's all within Boone County. It's kind of the northern part of Boone County. It's one Florence district, about part of Burlington, most of Hebron, and then out towards Bulletsville and Petersburg and out that way. So not quite to Rabbit Hash. Basically between Constance and Rabbit Hash on the river and then down into Florence. A little bit about me, and yeah, I have notes. So. A little bit about me. Usually what I first thing people do is they look at me and they go, Enriquez? Oh, look Latino. So my dad is from South America. My dad's from Venezuela. And I take that opportunity to remind people that South America was settled by Europeans, just like North America was. So my dad's European ancestors just wanted it a little bit warmer, so they went south. After the way the weather's been the last few days here, right? I have 2 sisters and a brother. Both my sisters are in the Air Force. Well, actually, one's retired from the Air Force, and the other one's currently in the Air Force. I have 3 children, all in public school. My oldest is in college in Boston, and then my second daughter is in high school. She goes to Cooper, and then my youngest, my son, he's at Camp Ernst Middle School, where I serve on the site-based decision-making committee at Camp Ernst. I went to Boone County High School, graduated from Boone County a couple of years ago. Went to Georgetown College, got my bachelor's degree at Georgetown College in Kentucky. Got my master's degree at Northern Kentucky University, my master's degree in teaching. Taught for about... Apparently my mom is calling. That's fine, that's fine. Taught for about 5 years. Spent most of the time at Royal High School teaching in business and technology. I've also worked, outside of that, I've worked in the IT industry for a number of companies, everything from small mom and pop stores where we built computers back in the day when they called them clones, all the way to large companies, including doing support for GE aircraft engines. I worked for a couple of years at Microsoft in Seattle. So I kind of have a real broad spectrum of experience. Aside from that, I grew up, my mom and dad divorced when I was young. My mom was a school teacher, and so I grew up on a school teacher's salary, and as many of you are probably aware, that doesn't make for a lot of money. But, you know, I never felt like I was needing. I remember my first Christmas, after my mom and dad divorced, the first Christmas, my mom was teaching at Campbell County High School, and we didn't have a whole lot of money, so she couldn't afford a Christmas tree at the time, and so she took one of our lamps and some wire coat hangers, and she stretched them out, and she put some tinsel that my grandmother had given her before we moved up here, and she fashioned a Christmas tree. That was our Christmas tree. I remember that. But we had a really good time, and you know, I know what it's like to struggle. You know, I know what it's like to not have much, and I think one of the problems that I see in a lot of the people we have representing us right now is they don't seem to understand that. They don't seem to be able to relate to that, what it's like to not know how you're going to pay your bills. To look at your stack of bills and figure out, okay, well, this month I can pay the electric bill, the water bill. They're probably not going to shut that off, so I can wait a month on that because I've still got to buy food, and you know, and heaven help you if you get sick and you have to buy medicine and go to the doctor. I feel like a lot of our representatives just can't relate to that, and that's important. You need to be able to relate to that to represent people. And I think being able to relate to that allows you to have empathy and to care about other people. And when you care about other people, you treat them well, right? The people you care about, the people you love, you treat them well. You want to treat them well. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is caring about each other and treating each other well, helping each other out. You know, some of the issues going on right now, obviously the public education and support for public education. To me, it's really simple. You have to fund public education. We have to fund public education. That includes whether it's the public employees' pensions or whether it's public school in general. In the state of Kentucky, the legislature has been really good about creating mandates for education and then not funding them. We've got to stop doing unfunded mandates. It has to stop. If the legislature is going to say the schools need to do X, whatever it is, here's the money to do it. One of the most frustrating things out of this last bit was when they were talking about textbooks and how they cut the money out for textbooks because, well, we don't use textbooks, we use digital textbooks. You still have to pay for the digital textbooks. You don't get to just, it's not like somebody just hands you a PDF file and you hand it from person to person. And I think that's what they have in mind. Again, it's that inability to relate to what actually happens in the classroom. You still have to pay for those textbooks. Yeah, they don't wear out and the covers don't tear off of them, but next year you still have to pay for those next students to have that. So you can't just cut the budget and say, oh, we'll just buy one PDF and copy it and give it to everybody. It doesn't work that way. You know, there's a quote that I really like from John Adams talking about education. He says, laws for the liberal education of youth, especially of the lower class of people, are so extremely wise and useful that to a humane and generous mind, no expense for this purpose would be thought extravagant. The founders of our country knew how important education was, how important public education was, and that it was the cornerstone of our democracy. We have to have a strong public education. We have to. Talking about the opioid crisis a bit, obviously we have issues there. One of the big things we can do to help curb that is the needle exchange program. Northern Kentucky Health Department has been working very hard for the past several years on the needle exchange program. First one in Northern Kentucky was in Grant County. It's been up for 2 years. They've had great success in Grant County. In 2 years, they've had 322 participants, and out of that, 163 referrals to treatment. That's 51%. And that includes people who just went once to the needle exchange program. So 51% of the people that have gone in the past 2 years have been referred into treatment. That is huge. That is a big win. Key to treatment. A lot of people say, well, you can't force people into treatment. Studies that show that the rate of relapse is nearly identical between those who are forced into treatment and those who go voluntarily into treatment. There's almost no difference. Where the difference comes in is once people come out of treatment, they have to have support. There has to be a support network for people when they come out of treatment. That is where the critical difference is. Part of that support is making sure that they have jobs. That we have employers in this area that will help people who are in treatment programs, who are in recovery. One of the other things that people complain about when it comes to needle exchange is, well, it's going to cause more crime. We're going to see a rise of crime. I don't want it in my neighborhood. You know, do the mobile ones someplace else. In Grant County in 2 years, do you know how many EMS and police calls they have had to the health department during the needle exchange program? 0. In 2 years, they have had 0 calls. So clearly it does not increase it. People say, well, do the mobile needle exchange. In order to do a needle exchange at the Northern Kentucky Health Department, it's about I think it was like $240, $250, somewhere around there for them to do it. They do it 1 day a week. It's like 4 or 5 hours a day for 1 day a week. In order to do a mobile needle exchange, The cost of that for the same time frame goes up around $800. That's the difference in the cost of a needle exchange. Mobile, over $800. If they use the existing health department facility, $250. Huge difference. I just want to talk a little bit about criminal justice reform. We've got to get serious about criminal justice reform. 25% of people in the world who are in prison are in the United States. It is a staggering number. For African American males, 1 in 4 African American males will go in to the prison system at some point. Bail, part of criminal justice reform, bail reform. We should not be punishing people simply because they are poor. Setting bail at $5,000 for somebody who's poor and setting it for somebody who's rich is obviously a huge difference. Rich people can pay that, they get out. Somebody who's poor can't afford to pay the bail, they sit in jail waiting for their court date. Prisons should not be profit-making ventures. The only thing that does is it puts prisons in the job of creating more prisoners, to create more money. Finally, I want to wrap up talking a little bit about transparency in government. I think in the past couple of weeks, we've seen in Frankfurt how little transparency there is. Closed-door meetings, where even members of the committee are locked out of the meeting, so that they don't know what's going on. Bills introduced with 12 hours to read a 300-page bill and vote on it. Taking a bill, stripping out all the language, replacing all the language, and changing the name of it, because that's the only way they can get around the rule of not being able to introduce new legislation after a certain date. That must stop. It has to stop. There needs to be a limited amount, there needs to be a guaranteed amount of time that legislators are provided to review any legislation before it is voted on. When I'm elected, that is something I will push hard for. There must be a minimum amount of time to review before you can vote on it. If it needs actuarial assessment, it should be required to have that actuarial assessment before a vote can be taken on it. It's absolutely ridiculous. Those are kind of the points I wanted to go over. You know, at the end of the day, again, it's representing you. It's caring about our neighbors and doing what is right by each other. So find somebody to support me if you're in my district, even if you're not in my district. Come help out, help any one of these other candidates. There are a lot of candidates running this year. We all need a lot of help on our campaigns. So take time, even if it's, you know, I only have 2 hours on this Saturday, let one of us know. Trust me, we can find something for you to do 2 hours on this Saturday. But help, get involved. Definitely get involved. Thank you so much. I appreciate
it. Okay, we're going to take now about 20 minutes until about 8:15. Going to let everybody, if you need to go to the restroom, it's directly across the hall. There's snacks, there's cold water, if anybody needs something to nibble on. And please feel free to walk around and talk to our candidates, ask them questions. There's also cards, buttons, different information available on all of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you want to introduce the two other candidates over here? Roger?